Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. Like I did say, there are some very great products courtesy of Stanbic Bank and the agricultural credit facility that is being run by the Central Bank, Bank of Uganda. If you are a farmer right there and you are grappling all the same, we do have products that you should be listening into. Yes, courtesy of Winnie Mulisa. She is the head of disbursement and recovery at the agricultural credit facility at the Central Bank, Bank of Uganda. We also do have Melissa Nyakwera. She is the head of agriculture business or head of agri business at Stanbic Bank. Both ladies join me right now in studio. Very good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, Melissa, Stanbic Bank has been in partnership with Seeds of God Farm Clinic for the last 3 years. Tell us why you decided to join this initiative.
Thank you. Good morning, viewers. And I'm very glad to be here. So we are, as Stanbic Bank, are really keen on this program, and that's really because agriculture is the backbone of Uganda. In terms of the fact that it employs 65% of our population, is the highest foreign exchange earner, but only contributes 23% to GDP. And that in itself is a mismatch in the sense that you employ so much and only contribute 23%. And that's really because of the challenges the sector faces. These include low yield because of subsistence farming practices, poor post-harvest handling methods, and limited access to finance. So we partner with you on this program because you do bring in experts that showcase or train the farmers on best farming practices, show them how they can handle their produce. And on our part, we come in to also showcase the fact that we support financing to these farmers as a means to move our country forward.
Don't you find it largely disturbing that a sector that is contributing 23% of our country's gross domestic product is only getting that mega funding that, like we saw in the budget? The priorities that are being given to the agriculture sector, do you think that a sector that is capable of employing 11 million people is being underfunded? I
would tend to agree with you. And I think there is more funding that needs to come through. But as well, it's to not say, we wouldn't say that we want it to be left to the government on its own. It is for the good of all of us. So it's important that we as private sector also participate in this sector.
Indeed. And you believe for this sector to grow, our farmers need to make that shift from subsistence farming all the way to commercialized agriculture. And that's where Stanbic Bank steps in to offer the money, the financial muscle to the farmers so that they could be able to produce on a mass scale. How easy or hard has this initiative been for you at Stanbic Bank, expediting it?
I think it's a journey. And the reason as to why I say it's a journey is because the agriculture sector is faced with several challenges. It's not just the limited access to financing. The limited access to financing is one of those, but it's also the know-how, the technical know-how. So I could give you funding, but if you don't know what fertilizers to apply, when to apply them, how to store your produce after you have harvested, then it's a moot cause. So in my opinion, it's that we need to deal everything from one end to the other for us to make this a sustainable and really economical sector.
All right, let's also bring in Winnie Mulisa, the head of disbursement and recovery at the agriculture credit facility run by the Central Bank, Bank of Uganda. We also do know that the coronavirus pandemic has wreaked havoc on so many of the lives of our people right here, both their health, and their economic lives as a whole. And it has also affected the potential worthiness of potential borrowers. It reduces your credit rating, because maybe you are unemployed right now, things are not moving like they used to move before the pandemic. So we would like to know, how has the agricultural credit facility performed during this pandemic in the wake of all these challenges?
Thank you very much. Good morning once again, our viewers. It's true the pandemic has affected so many sectors of the economy, and the agriculture sector is not the exception. The SCF has been able to, to an extent, the sector has been affected, but not so much, because the farmers have been able to continue production. And we have seen that through the growth of the portfolio. I will tell you that from March 2020, when the first lockdown happened, to March 2021, we have been able to grow our portfolio by 134 billion. That shows that the sector continues to perform. The challenges are there, but the central bank has been able to provide some relief guidelines for our farmers and through the banks, so that the banks can be able to, for example, restructure the loans or reschedule the loans, so that the borrowers or the farmers who have been affected are able to reorganize their cash flows. They can engage the banks in terms of maybe postpone the repayments, you know. So there are challenges, but the central bank has been able to, provide some relief. Yeah.
We also do know, Melissa Nyakweda, that prior to this COVID-19 pandemic, Stanbic Bank was that go-to bank for all the farmers across the country. And despite being among the, yourselves, you're also grappling when it comes to credit and so forth, because the potential creditworthiness of borrowers actually did reduce. But then what is your position as Stanbic Bank? What is your plan to cushion all these farmers post the pandemic period?
Thank you. I think I'll start by saying that as a bank, we continue to support the sector. We have about 450 billion shillings credit in the agriculture sector. We support the sector from the farmers, commercial farmers to agro-processors, input providers. So we do support the sector.
The whole value chain.
The whole value chain. And what kind of support have we been offering in terms of trade financing? We give them contract and invoice discounting or inventory financing. We also offer, this is for really grain processors who want to export or are supplying into a contract. We also offer term lending over 1 year when you want to put up maybe a warehouse or building for machinery, poultry farm. So it is, we do offer that. We also offer vehicle and asset financing, where the asset is the security. We're talking about haulers, dryers, we're talking about coolers, we're talking about tractors, you name it, within that sector. So all those are things of facilities we do offer currently. We also give insurance.
Under the asset financing facility?
Yes, that's under asset financing facility. We also do offer insurance. Insurance in the sense that you need to secure your assets, you need to secure your production. We have crop insurance.
So you give me the money and you even help me insure the equipment.
So
how beautiful is that?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
And so that's what we have been offering. Now, when you talk about the pandemic, we do know that it has really impacted people severely. And there's a certain group of people that do not necessarily sit in that space, or they are on their own or on an individual basis may not qualify. So what we've done together with several funders, or we have come up with what we call a circle proposition.
All right.
Now, the circle proposition is really looking at farmer groups, cooperatives, you name it. And what it looks at is that we offer an account, first of all, that is interest-free, charges-free. You just can transact. You can withdraw. You can deposit funds for free. You can transfer funds for free.
Yes.
That's the first thing about that circle proposition. The second most important thing about it is we're able to lend to the groups at 12.5% per annum. What that means is that they can then borrow those funds and onward lend to the farmers in those groups, or I'll actually use those funds to purchase an asset that will add value to their production. And that 12.5% is important because it then means that if you look at it per annum, they're actually paying slightly over 1% per month only for that facility. It is unsecured, up to 200 million shillings. And if you want to go for a year, if you want to go for more than a year, we will need security. And for that, we can also go to 1.5 billion shillings up to 36 months. So that proposition comes through with capacity building for the leaders, circle leaders, as well as literacy, financial literacy for the members. It also comes through with other opportunities or options. We do encourage that the circles do register as bank agents to allow or ease their disbursement of funds onto their members and collection of funds from their members. We've also launched what we call the FlexiPay wallet, a wallet, just an electronic wallet that allows the farmers or these members of these circles to also push money and push funds out of, so that they can literally be, funds can be disbursed onto their wallets, and they can also make payments off their wallets for free. So it's to just really look at the situation and respond to the need to provide capital for them to be able to continue to run their businesses, but also in the current context that does not allow a lot of physical interaction, to allow them to transact in an electronic way without doing it the physical way.
Melissa Nyakwera, she is the head of agribusiness at Stanbic Bank. Tell me those products are not so, yes, very attractive that you're shaking in your boots right now. 450 billion loan book, courtesy of Stanbic Bank. They can give you over 200 million unsecured loan for over a year. So please, if you are grappling with the pandemic, there are answers to your problems. There are solutions. And Melissa is here to expound more. We also have Winnie Melissa. She is the head of disbursement and recovery at the Agricultural Credit Facility at the Central Bank. Winnie, let's talk about access to the SEF services. We are in the pandemic, largely under lockdown for the next 42 days. So movement of our people is really, really curtailed. So how can they reach you? How can they access SEF services, Agricultural Credit Facility services, during this time of the pandemic?
Thank you very much.
Because we do know you're also operating at under capacity because of the same.
That's right. We do. We are. Like I mentioned, that it's true. Everybody has been affected, but luckily, what I think there's something that we as a positive that we have picked out of this pandemic. Acquaintance. In that we have been able to, or we need to embrace digitization. We need to embrace the fact that you don't actually have to move to the banks. Melissa has explained that, you know, the banks have now embraced agent banking, so you actually don't have to go to the head office. You can access through any of the branches near you. All you have to do is deposit your applications, your documentation with the branch, the nearest branch or the nearest agents, and they will be able to process your application online. So these processes are ongoing. The banks are doing that, so you don't have to stall your financing requirements just because you can't be able to access your bank at the head office. And for those who are able to move, of course, we encourage you to continue. Take your applications to the nearest bank. Continue, because this service is available. Melissa has actually, for us, when we hear all these products coming on board, we are happy. Why? Because one of the objectives of setting up the SEF was to be able to trigger the banks to lend to the sector and come up with all these financing products. So the fact that the banks are able to easily come up with these products to lend to the farmers is a plus for the SEF. It means that we actually have been able to meet our objectives. Yes.
So, but as SEF, what are you doing to ensure that you cushion these farmers, that as they clamor for these commercial banks to receive money, to borrow more money, what are you doing to ensure that you protect them, that you cushion them from losing everything to the banks?
First of all, the SEF allows for a grace period of up to 3 years. That means that as a farmer or a borrower, if you are to access funding, for example, for over a period of 5 years, and maybe initially you wanted a grace period of 6 months or 1 year, depending on the cycle of the project, along the way you've been affected by the pandemic. It means that you can actually come to the bank, engage with the bank, and be able to obtain additional grace period, because you still have up to 3 years. So that is one.
You can
Two,
renegotiate
yes,
your grace period?
you can renegotiate your grace
Please,
period.
why are you not clamoring for these services, dear Ugandans? Please. The Agriculture Credit Facility, you have Melissa Nyokwera, Stanbic Bank, they are willing to overhelp. 450 billion with Stanbic Bank. The Agriculture Credit Facility is also going to make sure that they cushion you from these commercial banks
That's
taking
right.
everything.
But
Go ahead. The second issue.
I also mentioned that the central bank has put in place credit relief measures
Okay.
for the banks. So even for those who are not able to benefit from the grace period, for example, if you've already exhausted the grace period within the facility, you are actually allowed up to 12 months of
Another
relief.
4 years.
So the banks, there are mechanisms in there, like I mentioned, they can restructure your loan so that you pay a smaller installment. They can postpone your interest or principal payments so that you're able to reorganize your cash flows. There are all so many relief measures that have been, provided
And indeed,
for the banks.
Melissa, Winnie, with all these interventions, I'm grappling to understand why Uganda is not the food basket for East Africa, let alone the whole of Africa, with all these interventions financing for our farmers.
Well, they're like
Is it
Melissa mentioned.
lack of information for our farmers that they do not know?
For one of those is lack of information. There are also other challenges, she mentioned about, the agricultural practices,
Right.
what kind of inputs are using, they say, subsistence. So that is actually why we are doing this. One, to provide this information. Two, engaging with the seeds of gold, where you're able to bring in the experts like NARO so that they can train the farmers on the best practices. What do you need? Before you even go to the bank for funds, you need to be able to be prepared. How do you get prepared? But by using the best practices, by using the best inputs, by practicing using the best agriculture practices available on the market, the best available technology for increased yield, increased output. So I know it is not something that can happen overnight, but steps are already being taken, as you can see. And I think we have moved, a good step, some good steps.
All right, let's also bring in Melissa Nyokwera. She's from Stanbic Bank, the head of agribusiness. Melissa, as a leading bank for farmers in our country, Uganda, what plans do you have as Stanbic Bank, or areas, priority areas, have you singled out as a bank to actually finance during this pandemic?
I think the one I would say is a real priority for us is what I talked about, the groups, the farmer groups or the SACCOs. I will say that historically we haven't played in that space. What we essentially really did was to play with the processors, the agro-processors, help them increase capacity. But then they've also come to us and said, you're helping me increase capacity. I need for you to help me secure production or inputs that come into there. So hence our reason to go down to the next level and start to find solutions for the farmer groups to ensure that they are able to produce, increase their yield production, as well as ensure that they are producing quality so they can supply into the agro-processors space and exporters space, yes.
Yeah. So how can one qualify to access funding from Stanbic Bank?
So to qualify to access funding is, one, you need to have a business plan. You need to understand what it is you're going to use the funds for and how you will apply the funds. We need to understand what your cash flows will look like.
Credit history.
Definitely your credit history, what your historical performance looked like, but also into the future. Are you able to actually service this debt? And if you're able to do so, then you do qualify for access to the financing.
Because I was looking at some of the literature from what you were doing last year around October, still Seeds of God Farm Clinic, courtesy of Stanbic Bank, when you were pushing this initiative. And you were talking about if someone gets a contract with the World Food Program, you help them with the supply chain. Help us understand exactly what happens in this regard. How exactly do you finance someone in such a scenario?
Okay. So in such a scenario, there are two ways to finance them. So either they've, in a situation where they do not have the right quantities.
Yes.
They don't have the right quantities to supply into that contract.
Yes.
We then assist them by financing them, yes, so that they can purchase the quantity to supply into the contract. We will usually hold that stock of SAP that they are building up to supply into the contract as security. And in a situation where they then move that supply and take it to wherever the World Food Program has asked them to take it, then we do use the invoice to wait for that payment, because so that's when we move on to the invoice discounting space. So because once the payment does come through from World Food Program, because you finish supplying, we then take off what we financed you with and give you the balance over that amount.
All right, that's
So
amazing.
that's
What about agricultural insurance under the animals and crops? How exactly does this work? The viewers would like to know.
So for the
If it rains, washes away everything, or it's too hot and then scorches everything to smeathereens, what happens in that situation?
Yeah, so for that bit, we have the weather-based insurance, or weather-based index insurance. And good enough, the government of Uganda for agriculture has put up, so the premium should be 5% of your total debt. But they are paying 2.5% of that. So you only pay 2.5% of that, the premium, your required premium. And what it essentially does is it insures you in such scenarios, such that at the end of the season, if God forbid something does go wrong or did go wrong, you're then able to repay back, you're reimbursed the funds that you had borrowed. So you do not have to struggle to pay the loan, because the insurance would pay that loan in any case. Yes.
And also, so we've largely handled that issue of animals and crops, but what about the physical assets? Physical assets, I'm talking about the insurance for the physical machinery, agricultural machinery and so forth. So I've acquired this machinery courtesy of Stanbic Bank, and then it breaks down in 6 months. What happens then?
So we do also have insurance that covers that, the machinery. So depending on what the need is for each and the type of machinery, we also do cover insurance for that. So at the 6 months breakdown, you don't have to also struggle if you had the insurance in place. So we do offer those services through our bank assurance team. And the doors are open for anybody who requires any insurance for their produce, for their machinery, for their property. We are available.
All right, let's talk about something futuristic with Winnie Mulisa, yes, the head of disbursement and recovery. What kind of plans do you have as the agricultural credit facility to support the agricultural sector moving forward in the wake of this pandemic?
Thank you. One is that we intend to continue sensitizing the public, sensitizing the farmers, and informing them that there's available credit, affordable credit under the agricultural credit facility. This facility, of course, is channeled through the financial institutions that are supervised by the central bank. One of them is the Stanbic Bank.
Indeed.
By the way, Stanbic Bank was one of the, if not the very first financial institution that we worked with when we were setting up the ACF, and we are still going very strong with them.
Indeed.
Many of the things that Melissa has mentioned are things that we finance, and I'm sure they do finance them under the ACF. Machinery, grain traders, access to working capital for grain trade, and working capital for inputs for primary production. All these things that they have mentioned, our farmers are able to access through the bank. So we will continue to push this message through the available partnerships like the Seeds of Gold, and our government has pledged to continue to provide funding. And the banks have also pledged to continue supporting, because remember, the ACF is a risk-sharing partnership. The financial institutions contribute 50% for the commercial banks. The MDIs, the micro deposit taking and credit institutions, contribute 30%, and government contributes the other portion. So it's the risk-sharing mechanism. Melissa mentioned in the beginning how it is very important that we don't leave this sector to government alone. So the private sector has a very critical role that they are playing in modernizing the sector, and we want to be able to continue tapping into that area.
All right. You also did mention that we plan to use the digital world to tap into the fact that, we've cut down on physical contact. So we need to be able to contact our farmers digitally on the internet. But then we do have a tax on the internet that started on July 1st, 12% tax on data. Shall we see in the near future, yes, the agricultural credit facility running the government maybe, do away with this tax because it dampens or hampers the ability to access our farmers during this lockdown?
That's right. I guess those some of the counter effects of some of these interventions. But you also have to remember that government has got to be able to look for financing, to be able to undertake all these, developments in the economy, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is agriculture, health, and what. So sometimes it is a catch-22. But yeah, I guess it is, we'll continue to engage.
But do you anticipate a problem occasioned by this 12%?
Of course, I know to an extent, yes, because you're talking about digitization, and then there's a tax. So yes, there's likely to be a problem. But I think we can only be able to assess after. It is just starting.
I see.
So we can't really know how impactful it's going to be. It is only, we are only assuming. So let's see how it goes. And maybe we'll go back to the drawing board, see what what happened to the OTT. So we'll go back to the drawing board and, see what happens after we've assessed how it has impacted.
Melissa Nyakwera, your thoughts on this 12%? Should we throw it out as soon as yesterday? Because we need to access our farmers. How best shall we be able to do that if we have this 12% on tax?
No, I tend to agree with Winnie to say that let's wait and see what the real impact is. Before we can throw it out, but it is quite important that when you talk about digitization, it's to say that maybe something to touch on.
Indeed.
That one area that we have not really gotten into is really minus accessing farmer groups, which is easier. We also at some point will need to get to a level where we have access or can access and ensure that the smallholder farmer as an individual can access financing.
When you hear that we have 40 million acres of arable land in this country and we are only tilling 19 million acres of the same land, what comes to your mind?
Potential. Lots of potential. And when I talk about potential, I then mean that first of all, we are at a good place where we are located. We have 2 seasons a year. Not many countries have 2 rain seasons a year. So we can produce twice. Most countries produce once a year. So that's the first advantage we have. 2, the vast land that you've talked about.
Indeed.
Very huge potential. 3, our location. We actually can be a real food basket to all our neighbors.
Indeed.
And so for me, it's that potential that we really need to put our thought and backs into and harness.
All right. Indeed. 40 million acres of arable land, we are only tilling 19 to 20 million acres of the same land. So when you talk about agriculture financing, that's a factor that we should be discussing right now to boost the production so that more land is actually taken advantage of to make sure that Uganda is a food basket for the East African region and also the whole African continent and the whole global stage. My name is Romeo Busiku. Great conversation I've been having with Melissa Nyakwera, the head of agribusiness at Stanbic Bank, and also Winnie Melissa, the head of disbursement and recovery at the agricultural credit facility right there run by the central bank. Ladies, many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Indeed. You're still watching Morning at NTV. Let's take a breather. We'll return shortly with another pertinent conversation, largely painting a light or shining a light on the plight